Hi there, and welcome to Studio SN, your place for card making, rubber stamping, and paper crafting tutorials. My name is Sara Naumann, and I'm so very glad you're here. Today I want to show you two fun and easy ways to use your ink sprays for techniques that do not involve spraying the ink. We're going to create a really simple background with a brayering technique and then do a little bit of watercoloring to create our stamped and colored card focal. So the ink sprays that I'm working with today are from Altenew, and this is part of their metallic shimmer ink spray collection. And it's going to create some really beautiful color as well as a little bit of shimmer and shine. So let's begin with our background. I'm going to move aside my card and bring in a piece of smooth white cardstock. Now this is coated cardstock. I think you can see the shine of that. But this technique works equally well on matte cardstock. So it kind of depends on whatever you happen to have on hand. The two colors I'm using are Puffy Heart as well as Orange Cream. Now, Altenew does recommend that you shake the bottles until you can hear that mixing ball in there rattling. Because this is a shimmer spray, you want to have the pigment and the shimmer in here being mixed really well before you get to using them. The other reason I like to shake them is because then when I twist off the top and I pull out the entire top portion on here, I've got lots of nice color clinging onto this little nozzle. So I'm going to hold this perpendicular to my cardstock and just tap the color on here. So you can see I'm getting some really fun spattering patterns on here. And this is going to give me just enough color for the first part of my background technique. So I'm going to pop this back into the bottle and then come in with the orange cream, and I'm going to do the exact same process, just tapping this color on here. Now I don't want to cover the entire piece. I want some white to show through on here, so I'm just creating an all over polka dot pattern. Now I could leave this as it is because it looks pretty fun, but I want to create sort of a blended look on here, and that's where my brayer comes in. Now my brayer is clean, it's a little bit stained, but it's still going to do the trick. What I want to do is grab the brayer, hold down my cardstock, and I'm going to brayer straight across. I'm not going all over in a random pattern, I just want to make sure that I'm going in the same direction. This is going to blend out some of the dot pattern on here, but it's also going to allow me to keep some of those dot patterns on here so that I've got a really pretty soft and watercolor background. So all I need to do is just let this piece dry, and while it's drying, I can add some color to my card focal. So I'm going to move this piece aside, let that air dry. I can also speed up the dry time with a heat tool if I want to. So I have my stamped and embossed image on here. Now the stamps that I'm working with are also from Altenew, and this is the Weekend Doodles collection. And I'm using this large sentiment down here, this large image down here, as well as the small sentiment here, "You make my heart happy." So that's also going on the card. When I stamped this image, I used a black pigment ink, and I'm using the Obsidian ink from Altenew. While the ink is still wet, then I covered it with a clear gloss superfine embossing powder. This happens to be from Wow. That's going to give me the look of black embossing without those stray little black embossing powder granules that somehow just manage to hang on no matter how carefully I whisk them away. So this gives me a slightly cleaner look, but I still get the shine of what looks to be black embossing. I also, more importantly, get the raised image around here. So that's going to help hold in some of my color. So what I'll do is bring back in that orange cream, and I'm just depositing a bit of the color onto my craft sheet. I'll come back with some of the Puffy Heart as well. And I need some green for my leaves, and in this case I'm using the Mountain Mist, which is a really pretty green color. So I'll just add a little bit here. And then I also need to add some water. So I'm going to put a little puddle of water, not directly into the color, but just sort of off to the side. And I'm going to use a water brush for this, although you can definitely use a paintbrush, whatever you have on hand. I'm going to start with my lightest color, which is that orange cream, and get a bit of a watery wash on here. And then I'm just going to color in that flower. Now, because the edges are raised with that embossing powder, it's giving me a bit of a border. It's kind of helping to hold in that watery medium. And it also helps to sort of guide the brush as well. So I'll just clean off my brush with a baby wipe, come back and get some of that puffy heart, that really pretty pink, and color in the other flowers in here as well. So I'm just loosely coloring in each of these blossoms. Now you can add more or less water to your ink spray. It just kind of depends on the intensity of color that you want. You can start with a really light color and then go back and add more, do some shading and create some real depth and dimension. For this demonstration though, I'm just kind of base painting in here. And I actually like that sort of sketchy and casual look because the Weekend Doodles stamp set is a really sort of casual stamp set. It's got some loose lines and a real doodled look, which means that you can be a little bit more casual with your coloring. Okay, so then for that pretty green, once again, I'm just going to come in and add some color to the leaves and let the raised edges of that embossing hold in that watery color. Now there are some open areas on the stem. If you want to, you can, kind of color through there with a little bit of green, but it actually looks fine without that coloring in there too. So take it or leave it, just depends on what you want to do. You could even come in with a fine tip pen if you had one and add some green along the stem in here too. Now you can just let this dry. Again, you can add some more color to it if you want to, although I think it looks fine with minimal color as well. So then what I would do is let this dry completely. Again, you can let it air dry or heat set with a heat tool to speed things up, and then do your die cutting. So there is a coordinating die. You just need to pop this down on here, add some masking tape to secure it in place, and then run it through your die cutting machine. Do, however, make sure that this is completely dry before you do that. Otherwise, you can end up with some blurred lines. And of course, the Weekend Doodles die set is what I'm using to die cut this image. And that will not only die cut around the outside edge, but also in some of these more detailed areas that are a bit more difficult to cut through. Once I had my piece all die cut, then I put it onto a die cut oval of white cardstock, and that's just to give a little bit more of a frame. The stamped and embossed piece is up on some foam tape squares, and that's again going to give a little bit more dimension there too. Here's my Brayered background, which coordinates perfectly. I've got my stamped sentiment on here with black, and all I needed to do was add some sequins and a little bit of baker's twine on there. So this is how easy it is to use your ink sprays in a couple of ways that do not involve spraying the ink at all. Thank you so much for joining me today on Studio SN. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to Studio SN on YouTube, and I'll keep you updated on the very latest stamping and card making techniques. In the meantime, please feel free to stop by my website, saranaumann.com, for more paper crafting ideas. Thanks again for joining me today, and I will see you next week.